Pledge allegiance to the flag of the States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Okay, so on the agenda here, we have public comment, but before we do that, let's go around the room. If anybody had any comments about conference this week that several of us have attended. Yeah.
Actually, it was my first time and it was very informative and thanks for sharing and letting us go. But I'm really disappointed in the Jeopardy introductory one. That was the only thing I was really disappointed in. It was all useless. It wasn't informative. They went very fast and they assumed people that were there knew everything that they were talking about.
Which one was that?
The Jeopardy,
Oh, no, I didn't go down.
the introductory Jeopardy land use. But other than that, everything else was very informative and very interesting.
Anyone else have a comment on the conference?
I've been to four. I thought this was by far the best. There were a number of things brought out. The various sessions that I attended that I thought were really quite interesting. The most interesting of all was the separation of planning and zoning board work from the legal aspect of trustee work or governing body work. And it was even brought up that that's law under the state of New York, which I wasn't aware of. The discussions regarding historic preservation, I thought were very interesting from a variety of perspectives.
It was at the last
It
session.
was the last session. You had to go, but the session on monies being available and session, there was two towns, Manans and Greenwich. It was fascinating that in the last 3 or 4 years, working with professionals. I did quick math, I don't know if it's exactly right, but between the two towns, with their professional grant writers, they received over $16 million.
16 million for 2
16.
municipalities.
That's correct. Towns, the size, villages, the size, or, well, Manans is bigger area in population. Greenwich is actually smaller.
1,600 or 1,700 people, something like that.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But it was all, there was a lot of clarification of things that over time have been misconstrued here. I learned a great deal. The one suggestion I made was that they videotaped the session. So that because there's 2 or 3 sessions in each time slot. And you can't do 2 things at the same time, at least I can't. And so if they were to videotape them all, then they'd be available for everybody to watch all of the sessions in the future, and that seemed to be received quite well. I hope in the future they'll do that. I would urge anyone that is interested in how the planning and zoning process works to go to it. That's on it. This one was really good.
Kept turning to P, I was like, this is our competition. And every time they would open them, like the mayor from Greenwich would say something, I'm like, we're competing for that one. We're competing for that one.
I found it interesting too, because I went up and talked to a couple of them. I couldn't believe all the grants I got millions and millions of dollars. And I asked, how they did it, and they hired a professional person, but I said, is it based on how much money you have in fund? You have too much money in your village? If 3 people said no, and had very little to do with that. Maybe the smaller grant, but the larger grants. So I think it's something that our village has to really have to start going after. So I mean, if you wouldn't believe all the money they got.
And
They
for
got-
things that are very real.
Real money, do things that we could have been doing with unbelievable amount of money. Bagger. And then like Rory said, the separation between the legislation body and committee, it's the separation. Talked about that for quite a bit. But I think it was the best conference I went to. I didn't go. I went to the historic.
The Clifton Park,
Excuse me?
the historian from Clifton Park, that
Yes.
that was interesting
He was
too.
very good.
There was also a lot of money historically that we could be getting too. Local government, the historic. I've been to, I don't know, maybe it's elderly.
You are so.
This was by far the best, but they do get better every year.
This was my first one and I found it to be very well organized.
Yeah, oh, yeah, they're.
Yeah, I enjoyed the notes. I took some good notes. Few questions actually.
Was very good too.
Don't forget to this. All right, we've got our subgroups to break out into. So anything else on the conference?
Oh, no, subgroups, and I heard the subgroups, they didn't finish their work.
That's a good question. Let's hold that until we get to the breakout so we can talk to that. So next on the agenda is public comment. So if there's any, Jen, is there anybody on Zoom?
Frank is.
And if so, if there's any
I'm
public.
looking,
that
I'll
you're
look.
aware of?
No, there's no one on Zoom.
Okay. Anybody in the audience, any public deputy?
Well, I don't. One question I want. I went,
What about that? I-
well, because I, when I was B and I started to look at it, and we have a lot of Airbnb people. And this, so far, there's only been one incident that, where we caused problems and that stuff. But that might be something. Which they could. That was the one where they outlined what Greenwich and Nance has done. And I don't remember which one of them was did a mow up. And that was part of, their progression to get, but they were already in the second phase to get the real money. So I think that needs to get completed, and I don't know if both of them got to go forward, or I think one got DRI. So, when it was still given small pieces. So that's where the big dollars are. And the reality is, unless you do first step plan, you're not going to get the big dollar implementation. And
Unless you do what?
unless you first have paid professionals to do what.
Yeah. Right.
So that's what the board is gonna do. The rezoning is a real positive. The comp plan, that's a real positive, so, we are on the path. But-
Sidewalks is a big positive too.
So I don't think those these have only been working on for a couple of years. I think they've been working on it. I think you could check that, but just the progression of applying grants, waiting till they come in, doing them, et cetera, et cetera. It's a long range process. And also the big money is in infrastructure. And unfortunately, the village can't get water and sewer money until right now, certain aspects. We could have already been getting the water and sewer grants by now. If we had districts set up and we didn't, so that's one happening.
So they're trying to set up a district, right now. So I'd like to say, maybe paper, or committee, revenue, or whatever. maybe.
Yeah, no, I think we're on the right path. It's just, I think it's just some things that didn't happen in the past. That's just my comments on that.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. Anyone else?
Sure,
This is the first meeting and I have looked at the past minutes, so please, yeah. If I'm missing something, apologies for that. I was just curious, is the consultant here tonight? He is not. So that's actually a good point. I was going to go over that after public comment.
Oh.
They're said that.
Yeah, I just, I don't know if this has already been discussed, so take it for what it's worth, but, I think it's important. I know from the board point of view, the way that the contract went out, we're paying 85 grand for a consultant, no matter how much or how little we're. So please give them as much, have them in on the ground. Attend these meetings so that every board member has access to our consultant. They may have particular questions that only they can answer. And also it keeps us from going in a direction that maybe isn't gonna end up being productive. And now we backtrack and we lose time and spend our years. So I think it's important. There's a reason we got, we hire professionals, as a lot of folks have said here, professionals make the difference. In all these things, so, let's make sure we access that expertise, that knowledge, regarding this. The only other thing I would say is, there's been a lot of great work done. Obviously the comprehensive plan, I think that was a great document. And even before that, the economic development plan, I think those are two excellent roadmaps. That basically should guide every decision that the zoning advisory committee made. Because those were actually the voices and vision of the residents of Boston Spa. And, I know personally, being a board member, I'm supposed to represent our constituents first, second, and third. Whatever our residents want, and whatever their vision, always comes first. And, I think that's reflected in the economic development plan. And, so.
One. So just a quick, I'm going to reiterate the email that I sent everybody on the schedule, with Chris, that I worked out with them a few weeks ago. So per Marilyn's suggestion, we'll have Chris Cushel from Fisher in, every other meeting to answer our questions. So he's not in this meeting, but he'll be on Zoom the 15th. He will also be, on Zoom the 7th of March, which is the next meeting. And that's because he can't make the following meeting. So he's going to attend, next meeting and the 7th of March, and this is all my new email. April 10th and April 11th, Chris will be in town. He'll be driving in from Rochester on the 10th. Spend the afternoon here. And then in the morning of the 11th, he will also be here. So I sent out an email to the trustees, to Dave, zoning chair, planning chair, John Comey, historic district chair, to say, hey, let's get some time on the calendars to do two things. One, have interviews. So I just put together a proposal of just interview slots. So if anybody wants to meet with Chris, feel free to reply back, and I'll just record time to fix, so we have some semblance of a schedule or itinerary for Chris when he arrives. And then I heard back from Laura and also heard back from John Comey on that. I'll need help with doing a guided tour. Because one of his items on the scope of work was he wants to take some time and just walk around and get to know the village a little bit, and it's important to us. So trustees have that email, the chair have that email. I'm looking at anyone else that anybody can think of that he should meet with. The trustees, the chairs, mayor, anyone else, as well as us. We tried to make it work so that he could have the tour coincide with a meeting. But it just never lined up, so we thought we had one in April, but then we had to revert back to a plan B, which is the 10th and the 11th. And then on April 18th, we have our ZAC meeting, and that is when officially all of our due diligence will be done and ready for him. That said, he's already checking our spreadsheet, and any notes that you have here, he said he just got access to it, I think, last week, so he's spending time to go through that. So if you do have anything you wanna ask him directly, you have his email address. He has been CC'd on numerous emails with all this, so you can either wait for the feedback to show up in the spreadsheet next to your comments, or you can email him directly. And then June 20th, we talked a little bit about if we are spending 85K on getting something, and that work product is a recommendation to the Board of Trustees to accept, modify, reject, whatever they want to do. But our directive is to work with Chris to get rezoning laws to the village board. So 85K to do it. So how do we know we're on the right path? What are some of the items that we can do? What are some of the checks and balances we can put into place? So that way we don't go too far down the path and say, oh no, form-based code may not be working for us. So the thought is, after we get a first iteration, after we either do the tours or public hearings or a first draft, I think Chris wants to do a first draft. At that point, we take that draft, we'll run a tabletop exercise. We will run a use case that either comes up, either it's a new application or it's a variance, or whatever case that we want to do. We run it through the system and see how zoning and planning work out with it. And if it makes sense to us on a high level, and that Chris is on the right path, we will continue down that path past June. Chris had a concern where he wanted to get more on paper before we did that, but I said, I think you just need enough for guidance to make sure we're on the right path. We're not trying to be precise and specific, but it's so we get a feel for if this will actually approach form-based zoning code will work for us. And so that was the thought behind that. And he enjoyed it. He thought it was a good idea for the tabletop exercise. So June 20th for that.
I don't know if your schedule allows for it, but I think that there's one other addition we could make in terms of the people that he meets and talks to.
Yeah, sure.
That would be the significant property owners of the village.
Okay, if you want to give me a list, I'm happy to add.
I'll do that. I think that it is really important to get their perspective on what they have, what they've been through, what they expect, what's holding them back, what's not holding them back.
Sure.
And all of those things are important.
They're essentially guinea pigs that have their own feelings.
Well, they're all taxpayers, they're all people who have invested in the village that have the potential to do much greater investment. And this exercise that we're involved in will lead to a, hopefully, is everybody there?
Yeah.
It's hissing and stuff. Will lead to a plan that allows for controlled and practical development that meets the needs of the village, the master plan, the economic plan that was done a few years back, to Mr. Raymond's point. But these people have a vested interest, and I think that that our consultant should be aware of them.
Absolutely.
If that can be fit in.
If it can be fit in, so I'm happy to take a different approach, but I did email everybody out, so there are time slots and we can do the tour if the afternoon of the 10th or the morning of the 11th, however it works out, but so make sure we had a somewhat semi-firm itinerary for Chris to show up.
I'll get you the list.
Thanks, sir. Okay, anything else before we turn our attentions to our, we break form and turn our attentions to our mini groups? All right, so for mini groups, I've got a little schedule here. We are 2 meetings, and we're on February, this is the 1st of February, my goodness. All right, so team 1, looks like we're reviewing site plan. Team 2, if you are on track now, mind you, you guys met separately than that, that's fine. Looks like team 2 is to stay on track would be historic section. Team 3, looks like that is Article 10 through 12, supplemental uses, non-conforming uses, enforcement administration. So then those are these are for 2 meetings. So those are the topics if you guys are on track. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to, because we have until April 18th, but pick up wherever you left off. Are there any questions, comments before we break form, we can dive into our topics? Okay. Marilyn, can you hear us? Are you good? You want to come back to team one so we can talk about, what are we talking about? Site plan?
Yeah,
Site-
the only thing I would say is, the only thing I would say is the audio has been going out quite a bit. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
whether
because
it's on my
whoever
end
on Zoom needs to be
or
mute.
your end.
So whoever's on Zoom needs to be on mute so you can hear it, because as soon as that background noise kicks in, the microphone here goes away.
Thank you.
All right, so let's hop into our mini sessions here and we'll use the rest of that time.
So we're on site plan Article 6.
Yep, let me go grab Marilyn here. All right, Marilyn, coming back in here.
And Marilyn, we also have Dave LaFountain sitting here who's the building inspector.
Oh, actually, that's a good point. So guys, we have Dave here. Pete and same with Pete too. If you just want to take some time, go to each table to help us out. Marilyn.
Just getting started. Just getting started. Since, if this is with your permission, Marilyn, and yours, Matt, since site plan review falls directly under the planning board, flag, so to speak, I'll just give you an overview of what it is, what we have to do, and what people go through, and some of the challenges that the existing code provides.
Yep.
And the fact that this planning board has significant power in terms of working with people other than residential to determine what their ultimate look of their business is going to be and the buildings, the site, et cetera. If you read, which I would certainly encourage everyone to do on this group, Article 6, excuse me, 6, site plan review. There is a significant amount of information that is in here required for a development of the site plan. We also have online the site plan application and the details involved in it. Where the stumbling blocks come are, in many cases for the last 30 years, the site plan laws and procedures have not been followed in the village. So when a new scenario develops that kicks into the code for site plan review, there's a fair bit of resistance from an applicant that, how come we have to do this? We never had to do this before. We've got a couple of cases that we've gone through, and we have one right now that's coming up on the 14th. That might be a good idea for everyone to listen in on or attend, because it involves a change in tenancy of an existing building where it does not, the division of the building and the plan submitted to the building inspector for what is to be done in the space are fine, but the site itself doesn't conform to Americans with Disabilities Act requirements. The owner took exception to that because he felt he bought it that way, and therefore that was perfectly acceptable. It's not. And so as part of the requirement for him to get the building permit for his tenant is an agreement to do some, unfortunately for him, significant work to his site.
So, all right, so that one specific case, so that looks like that's 205-19, purpose of a review, C, so the tenant, so any change in use.
Exactly. Now
Tenancy.
that particular little paragraph, I'll let Dave jump in for a minute and talk about how hard that is to deal with.
the reasons for a site plan review are quite specific there, but also quite vague at the same time. So, it's just a matter of,
So-
we need to tighten the language up in that.
But what do you mean by that? Is there an issue with ADA coming
No,
into play, or is this has nothing to do with
Under the
ADA?
objectives, you could insert the ADA stuff. But in terms of, and maybe that first part is okay the way it is.
Let me get my notes here.
If you, what it says, is, okay, the planning board has to approve the erection of buildings other than 1, 2, or 3-story three family residences. So 1, 2, and 3 family residences are excluded, okay, from site plan review, which I think might be something that should be questioned. Right?
What is a three-family residence?
A 3-family residence is just that, a 3-family residence. It's an apartment building. 3 units,
I think with the intent, there's anything beyond 3 units. Like that, by the-
right? In other words,
Anything beyond 3 units is.
and we don't get, the planning board does not technically look at 3-unit buildings, Margaret, as in site plan review. If it's a 4-unit.
It's
building,
Maryland,
yeah,
it's
in-
Maryland, and
I thought
and
that's
that
what it
was
said.
one
Thanks,
of my
Margaret.
first, that was one of my first questions as to why we're even including them in the category of not even having to look at them. So I was even more basic than that. I know we're talking about things you're dealing with, but why we're even looking at those.
That are 3 units or less?
We're not. The only thing we look at is anything larger than 3 units, Maryland. If you're saying we should be looking at 1, 2, and 3 family, I can't argue that. I would agree with you.
Shouldn't this be something we kick to the consultants to say, what do other municipalities do? Do they look at, or is
I
that
think
standard?
It's a point. In other words, it's one of the elements of this particular process that ought to be looked at.
Okay, well, I'll flag that.
Yeah, that was my first comment. I guess I don't have a problem with the 1 family or 2 family, but beyond that, I almost feel that the 3 family should not be exempted
So,
from site
The
plan
plan-
review.
Okay. I can't, from the experience I've had on the planning board, I don't disagree. I think that there could be an argument made, and this is something that could be discussed with the consultant.
Okay.
That even the 1 and 2 families in certain neighborhoods, in certain scenarios, should be looked at, okay? Because if someone has a smaller than average lot, for example, and gets the area variance to build a single family home, I think that they should be subject to some type of site plan review as to how they're gonna screen that house from the neighbors, et cetera. But right now, that doesn't happen.
Okay,
Okay.
I've noted that, so I can
Okay.
take that over to Chris.
The second piece of this, all right, which is the one that really has surprised a great number of folks moving forward, is the C under section 205-19, which states any change in use, tenancy, intensity of use, except that of 1, 2, and 3 family residences, which will affect the characteristics of the site in terms of parking, loading, access, drainage, utilities, or any other village services as determined by the building inspector. It's in that juncture that the landlords, okay, are reacting in a way of surprise because they've never been confronted with that before. That is to say, the code enforcement officer in the past never even looked at that. So for example.
Intensity of use, that's very big intensity.
Well, that's just it. It's vague and it's difficult to define, and the example I'll use is what's coming up in front of the board on the 14th, where an existing business downsized its operations and moved it all to one side of its building and left another space to create another business. The owner's argument is there's always been two businesses in there, even though I owned them, they were similar in nature. But that isn't the point. The point is that now he's establishing a new business which he doesn't own and creating a tenancy. Ergo, it's a change in tenancy, which falls under this. We had the same scenario on Milton Avenue with a change in use and tenancy of a retail store. Whereby we had to discuss a site plan, which is ridiculous, on a store that doesn't have a site. It has a storefront. But what it did kick it in was the signage aspect. So any changes to the use of a structure kicks in to site plan review. If it's a major project, let's just say let's assume that for some reason the fairgrounds decided to sell 15 acres and somebody bought it and wanted to do a subdivision there and build houses or apartments or whatever. We have a very detailed description of everything that they would have to do in order to bring that to the planning board to get approval. And in some cases, if it was a large enough project, it would likely go to the Board of Trustees for approval, but it goes through the planning board first.
So I recorded, just the quotes, change in use and tenancy. This text, this section needs to be tightened up. It's too ambiguous.
I think it could be
Well-
made a lot more specific and a lot easier to enforce. Because the other element of
The-
this is the enforcement aspect of it.
That's
Which is-
something the consultant can help us with, and I think we
I-
should be relying on his experience. But I actually think paragraph C is interesting. And I'm just wondering whether or not there are other parameters that we need to be considering when this change in use or tenancy or intensity actually happens. Because that's a direct impact on land use within the village.
It
Could
most
change the
assuredly
dynamics
is.
Of customers coming to the business. It could change the dynamics in water usage, the adequacy of stormwater on site, or whether or not there is adequate parking.
All of that
not
is,
for
all
the
of that is
particular-
addressed. Okay, all of that is addressed by the planning board in the process of going through this, along with the building inspector, I might add, but I do think that this section is verbose. It could be edited and made more specific. I think the entire process could be made more specific for everyone so that it can be easily understood by an applicant and easily enforced and gone through by the planning board.
I think it should say something that any change. And list these things, but not limited to those things.
Yeah. Any change, but not.
Any change. People get hung up on, well, I'm not, they read this and they say, well, I'm not changing the drainage, I'm not changing my utilities. These things are just kind of guides. There should be some verbiage about not limited to these, any change. Like I said.
Okay, capture, I got that.
They get hung up on those few bullet points, drainage, utilities, access. But, and oftentimes it turns out to be a lot more than just that.
Drainage,
Well, that's in there.
utilities, and
It's all
access.
here. But again, you go from that section to 20520. Marilyn, I'm gonna turn you around a little bit. So you're back with the group.
I can move there.
No, that's all right.
See if you wanna like roam around, see if other folks have any.
But we gotta lot of this to
Yeah,
look
we
at
sure
here.
Okay, this is. If you go to 20520, it states a significant number of objectives that have to be reviewed and discussed on every one of these scenarios that is brought before the planning board.
All right,
And if you look at it, it covers all of the things you talked about. It goes down, it talks about trees, it talks about building facades have to be compatible. That site lighting and signage are proper. The site plan is in conformance with the site plan definitions in the chapter. That the architectural features of the buildings are compatible with those. That there's adequate screening for any adult use. We haven't run into an adult use yet, okay, so that doesn't worry me too much. When we get into procedure and submission requirements, those are pretty boilerplate.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily have a significant amount of trouble with that. With the exception of if you are looking at a change in, let's say, use and tenancy from one type of store to another, there's a great number of things under the submission requirements for a site plan that are irrelevant. All right, and so in most cases, if we have a pre-meeting with the applicant, we go over what they need to provide and what they don't need to provide. If it's a major development, then yeah, they have to do all of it.
is that pre-meeting with the applicant actually at a public meeting of the planning board?
No, it is not. It is typically held with the building inspector and myself or a member of the planning board.
Non-quorum.
Non-quorum, none of that, okay?
Okay,
What we try to do, okay, which was brought up at this seminar we went to as a really good idea, is to have those types of meetings with almost any applicant so that the meeting itself goes more smoothly because they understand what it is they're up against. Most people don't get this, okay? They don't understand it. They just come in and want a building permit. And they don't realize what they have to go through, nor do they understand
We're section 20, is that what it is?
well, we're in section
205-20?
205-22.
Two.
yeah, I know we jumped
Oh, yeah.
ahead and I know we only have 3 minutes left. And the only thing I wanted to say
few.
is it's a big topic. And the way I look at this topic is we're going to have to take some small bites. 205-20, my opinion is I'd like to see us change and or add some new objectives for the review of the site plan. And I just jotted a few things down here that were issues that are brought up within the comprehensive plan. And also relative to working with other groups and boards who actually would be feeding some of this information to the planning board, such as paragraph F, which says, talks about living trees and what must be retained and what must be removed. I'm just wondering if we thought about having the park and tree board as a consultation, or the arborist that we use through Cornell Cooperative Extension. And for example, paragraph G and paragraph J, where it talks about building facades, architecture, and why we're not using the Historic District Commission for consultation on the site plan review, which is a topic that we did have at the last Historic District Commission meeting, and with some input from the attorney, Stephanie, there has been some discussion about that. So I think it's a lot to talk about in a very short amount of time. But I'm just wondering if those are the types of things the consultant can help us work through, based on his experience.
I guess
I'm going to say yes. I just want to make sure we flag that and put it into the spreadsheet. I'm happy to do it, Marilyn, if you don't have access, but I think you should have access at this point. To do that. Do you have access to throw that in there, or I'm happy to do so?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if you could do it. I'm just kind of a little pressed on time, not being,
Sure.
at home time. And I appreciate all the help you've given me and the permissions that you've enabled, Matt. So
I was just
appreciate
swamped
that.
today. I was hard to keep up on email today. I was just
Yeah.
treading water most
No,
of
I
the
hear
day.
you. And from tomorrow through the weekend and beyond, I mean, I'm going to be preoccupied with the grandson. So I
Well,
appreciate all
congratulations.
your help.
All right, so
Thank
what were
you.
the subsections? There were,
It's the
F.
Park and Tree and Historic Commission would be
Okay.
the input to the planning.
Okay.
Yeah, those are just examples of things that, it's outlined here in the site plan review process, but we have other boards that could help the planning board with some of this through consultation.
With all due respect, when we run into such things, the planning board does reach out to these other boards, although in the context of a facade scenario that's not in the historic district, we certainly don't reach out to the historic commission. We've never had to reach out to the Park and Tree Board because we've never had a major development where trees were affected. Well, actually, there was one, and we were very specific with it, and that is the corner. Now I'm gonna do this. It's West High Street and the street that leads to the high school, where the lots are now for sale.
Ballston Avenue, yeah.
That's what it is,
Yeah, there's
okay.
gonna be a major one there.
Well, there's two, they subdivided into two lots, which was a fairly difficult discussion to begin with. And the building inspector and I were very concerned about how they're gonna build there and how they're effectively not going to hurt the trees that are there. And that was certainly mentioned and discussed. And the reality is they haven't sold the lots yet. And I think that's because it's a terrible corner, and B, they're too much money, but that's neither here nor there. The planning board's job is essentially to protect the village and its residents above all else, okay, from anything that is going to detract from the overall appearance and character of the village. And it draws upon every resource that's available to us as necessary. Most of the things that come before us are relatively straightforward. In the future, I can see engineers being involved. I can see a great number of consultants having to be brought in if a major project comes to us, because it makes perfect sense to do that.
But so if you were to bring in other consultants, how would this language here, like the same section Marilyn was pointing out?
Again,
how would-
I think they would have to look at it, all right, and determine if it wasn't specific enough, which in many cases it's not, okay? For example, that the architectural features and location and dimensions of the building are compatible with the surrounding area. That's a totally subjective question,
Most of them are.
okay?
Well, but that's what
And
the
most of what
Historic
the- and
District
most of
Commission
what the
did
planning-
at that property on West High Street and
Well,
corner of Ballston Avenue. They were able to come in and not tell the property owner what style to use, but to educate them about what is in the neighborhood and to advise them about their options. Now that we have the Historic District Commission guidelines, and we have the comprehensive plan, which is advocating for the retention of our architectural character, not only within the historic district, but throughout the whole village, so that we don't lose that charm and character. That's an example of how an existing village board or commission can help the planning board during the site plan review process.
Input for guidance and
that's
recommendation
my 2
purposes.
cents. Yeah,
So you're saying guidance, provide guidance and recommendations? I think I captured that correctly. Let me just double check.
and I don't disagree with that at all.
Help consults, Park and Tree Store, if the proper, okay, yeah. All right, I'm gonna put that language in, advise, provide recommendations.
And Marilyn, I also agree that this particular chapter is going to take more than the next 5 minutes.
I agree. I'm happy to meet outside of if like us three plus putting Darvin. I can reach out to Darvin if we want to set up like a time at some point next week. I'll have more time
Yeah.
on my schedule next week.
I can make that work.
Yeah, I'm only gonna be available after the Super Bowl, so that's when I'm coming back.
So will you be,
I'll be flying back.
so are you amenable to meet at some point next week if I throw some dates out, Marilyn?
Next week,
Yeah.
after next weekend, after the Super Bowl, I will be back
back.
and we can
Oh,
do some
super.
meeting,
This weekend, next
yeah,
weekend.
Super 11th.
Well, let's
Yeah,
see.
February 11th.
Okay, and then we are
After-
reconvening again on the 15th.
Yep.
Okay. So ideally, in order to stay on track, we should get through this section between now and our next meeting.
Right.
So if we can meet anywhere between 12th, 13th, 14th, I think that'll work.
I think so too, and
Okay.
I
Yeah,
should
just
point out,
Set
and I
a
should-
day.
and I.
Yeah,
should- and I-
I'll set that up with us three and Darvin to make sure our little mini teams
And
come along.
in what is involved also in this chapter is the area and bulk schedules at the back.
That's a big one.
So
Oh,
that,
because that's an attached,
well, that's germane to all of this.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Article 7 goes into area and bulk, so that's why I think a second meeting of this particular committee makes perfect sense.
Okay. All right, that works.
And
That
I
works
guess we
for
can
me.
do it by Zoom if we have to, but.
Well, I think we'll be, so if
Probably
Maryland
to
said,
Maryland,
yeah, if we're meeting after the Super Bowl, then Maryland will be back in town. We can just find a
right.
location, library, or wherever, and we can just sync up.
All right, a conference room, whatever. works.
Conference room, anywhere. Okay. That work for you, Maryland? Okay. I don't think there's anything else on the agenda for us as a
There was,
zoning advisory committee, so you're free to hang out. I can put you on another table if you want to chat with anyone else. Or you can just hang up and enjoy
No, I
family.
did communicate with, yeah, I did communicate with Team 2 by email. So I did provide them the information that should help inform them about the historic district section of the code. And certainly Dave LaFountain can also inform them because he did sit in on the last meeting and he had some good ideas. So, but I appreciate all your help, Matt and Rory. And
Were you able
yeah,
to get those
set a day.
documents onto the site?
No, not because I just didn't have time to try.
Okay, if not, just
But what-
email me. I can put them up on in the location.
Yeah, I just emailed the information to Team 2, hoping that they would have for the discussion.
Okay. Okay, that works.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'll set a time up between the 11th and the 15th for us to reconvene finish this topic. Okay,
all right, great.
thank you, Marilyn.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy your vacation.
Where are you, by the way? Where in the continuous United States are you?
Well, right now I'm in San Jose at my sister-in-law's house.
Nice.
Tomorrow I will go to San Mateo, where my son and daughter-in-law live. And then we'll see the grandson first thing tomorrow morning. And
Lovely.
then stay there for several days. And then depending on the rest of the trip, either visit another sister who is up in Napa. And if not, we'll come back to San Jose. So.
Sounds great. Congratulations.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.
Like he said, it's a process. Right, that's right.
What do you mean by decision?
There's part of the person movies. Historic commission coming to the side.
We get by chair. Wow, that question. If the board has formally not, so part of the conference we went to, there were people from the Department of State that were providing guidance. And I keyed right in on this, and I kind of pointed out, I said, if the board, meaning the trustees, have not formally delegated regulatory authority, I think was the phrase, regulatory authority to any other board, then by default, that regulatory authority, and it's defined what those mean, like issuing permits, decline, all that retains with the board of village trustees. And so that's the question I have is, has that formally been delegated, the regulatory? If not, I don't know if any of that means anything. I don't know. It's an open question. Interesting.
One gives more help.
Yes.
So are these notes being made, how are these going to eventually get to Chris? Are they gonna be made there into the spreadsheet? Okay, into the spreadsheet, okay, because I know Chris is already in here, and this is a really good one for
It's
him.
got the sections,
Okay, cool, cool, all right.
but like you said, John,
He gets really people in there for the. Yeah.
from each side.
Went through the appeal process a couple of months ago. There really wasn't any guidance for the DBA. You know, he had written it back and helped them have some guidance when they have an appeal in the historic district.
Got it.
So he told me he went to Maryland.
Maryland's,
I think he mentioned that in Maryland.
I think that's probably the document that she mentioned as sending some historic district commission documentation to team two. So it may have been that, I don't know.
And the other thing.
Did you see
something that I think that really helps with it? Some things we went together. Is that municipalities that we thought specifically Clifton Park. Took a very interesting approach. They don't have a historic district. They don't even, they have a historic organization. That evolved. And what they did is they looked at the town and then realizing that the historic buildings. We defined as pre-1935. They made them historic areas. As opposed to redlining, what has been done. In our village, I believe that this, whatever we end up with in terms of historic aspect of it, needs to look at the whole village, because half the historic buildings in the village aren't anywhere near the historic district, and in the historic district are buildings that are not historic.
What they were trying to do, historic district versus historic building. And historic buildings are some that where they're trying to deal with keeping the similarity in specific neighborhoods. And there's a part of the content that's not that. There's a poorly defined of the.
The ultimate that came out of the meetings that I attended, okay, and I don't know that these were, probably that they were professional enough to put on these committees, is that the purpose of these various groups, these commissions, or what they're having, are for guidance and recommendation to planning and zoning, period over that. Okay, you do not have power to dictate what is done, and that seems to be critical to the overall process, because if the historic commission makes recommendations to the planning board on a certain project, it's incumbent upon the planning board to work through that, and then decide whether or not that works or it doesn't. The costs involved are something that we've never really discussed, in fact, is this type of maintaining neighborhoods and at the same time not letting them deteriorate, because the guidelines being provided by, we'll use the commission term, are onerous to the point where the building can't be saved.
Be a
prioritization in terms of what planning, historic commission and zoning are doing for land use plan, for safety, for various aesthetic things. And among those, and I'm sure they're not by category, but among those. Residents. And we're talking about the responsibilities of planning to allow.
So we're looking at it. We don't.
First of all, safe. What happens is that it's in conflict. Something that sort
We're just talking.
In the real world, the planning board rules.
That's what we're written. Which is wrong. And I think that's true of a lot of is in the zoning. world.
I agree.
It's a lot of things. So the vast majority. Yeah, yeah. And very, yes, we have this number, but what's the purpose of that number? What is it for the purpose of allowing emergency vehicles isn't for, it's for, and
Develop.
we don't know why those numbers exist and those things.
That is exactly why we're going through this, this way, because those questions are very real. Right? And frankly, I'm not sure that they're addressed properly in the reform standards. And they should. Well, again, it becomes a more cooperative effort on everyone's part if it's clearly defined, because the ultimate objective, I think, could be a majority of one, is whatever comes out of this has to be clear to applicants what they have to do and how they have to do it. And it has to be clear how it's enforced by the village. Okay, and right now, it's mud.
And I could see in some. There are some decisions by where they make the decision, and some type of decisions where they're clear recommendations, and there should be. These are the things that we feel are absolutely vital to decide on for our historic this, and then these are the things that are that should be. I mean, I think there should be, but it's certainly to have a reason to exist. There should be a core set of things that these are the things that are their purpose, they should be deciding on.
I respectfully.
And then other things that they have.
I'd like perspective to see what the zone, see for other districts. See what they come from in the past.
And again, the thing that's missed is that we all, the planning, the zoning board, and all of the various subcommittees that are out there, park and tree, whatever, theoretically, all have the same fundamental objective, and that is to deliver an end product that protects the village's status. I think that what this document does is create conflict because of the various things that are vague or not defined properly. So that the commission feels they should have an authority over this, which then affects this, and puts the governing, the zoning. Very awkward, is it? Right, it's, this one, historic and site plan are probably gonna be the two most important things we do. Because we have a quote historic district that is not historic. Okay, we have historic buildings that aren't included that should, if they had to be renovated, I'll use Saratoga Springs guidelines, which are absent. In other words, in Saratoga Springs, the design review commission, historic board is absolute. In other words, you don't, they report to no one, they answer to no one. There's no higher order, it's them or the house. Half, if not all, of the city buildings, okay, on Broadway. Historic. Every single one of them is renovated. Every single one of them has new windows. including village city hall. Yet the historic commission and the single service will not allow a residential developer to replace their own unit. Makes no sense, but that's how it works, and that's where it stumbles. Okay. The building that I renovated in Ballston 20 years ago, but I've had to follow Saratoga Springs guidelines directed. Wouldn't happen. Building would still be wrapped in aluminum siding and empty. Because all of us have to look at the practicality of financial aspects of developing and saving a building. If we had the White House here, well, then we're gonna spend what it takes to make it exactly. Okay, but I don't know if you're familiar, but we got a quote from a restoration company for Village Hall. And the specs that were written were such that they were the equivalent of the White House, the Lincoln Memorial, or whatever. It was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, okay? Well, I'm saying it was in over 100. Now, would it have been nice to scrape every piece of metal that's on the building down and restore it exactly? Certainly, that would be historically correct. Is it practical? Is it what would we end up with a better product than if we had some really skilled guys go in with materials and fix it? Subjective question, but the point is, it isn't done. So it's like a wind tunnel. So I guess what I'm hoping comes out of the collective is that there is a commonality of objectives. If we all can sit down and say, wait a minute, is this rational? This is reasonable. And what are we afraid of in terms of what could go wrong? Really?
Why? So,
And is it clear?
well, the process also, but here, there's the definition of where it's going to be. And where it is, but it's not why, because
Yeah.
why is they?
We are all.
This is why this is why that is or isn't still
Well, I can
appropriate.
tell you-
Will discussion of what is our to what this should be.
Maybe to answer some of those.
Thinking it also.
that. So, are you guys done with?
So I'm going. I'm all set. I'm good. Appreciate getting it all. Especially back to the watch.
Yeah. Other than the one. A little confusing just because. Because it hasn't been fixed for what we're doing.
Yeah. We have to take it to the old. Make it understandable. That, if we can come out of the whole history, there's that, I mean, it's about. And you will be too, because you won't have any. It's ridiculous, what we have to go through.
Set up.
It's plenty of people. Frankly, yeah, long conversation that I thought. How do you explain? To somebody. When our library had. State library, they were told to put in. Okay, they never. Hopefully, I'll take that. Like, law. Yeah, it makes sense. Here. Yeah. Correctly. And.
My board, well. So, and the section for the. Yes, because he went, he's a different. Right? And then it's. And it's a real pleasant thing. But the sign thing.
All right, Jen, I think, I don't think I am.
Hey there.
Good to go. Anybody else on camera, we can hang up. I don't think there's anyone else here.
I think you have to adjourn technically.
Ah, okay. That's right, technically. Well, we're not informed, we're forum and we're gonna be in our little meetings, our mini breakout session, so.
All right, so
Um,
you're good with recording for tonight. I
Yes.
am taking tomorrow off as a sick day, so I do not know if I'll get the recording to you tomorrow. Might be might be
That's
Monday.
fine. Yes, perfect. All right, well, thank you so much for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Of
Jen.
course.
We'll chat.
It's always fun to watch.
I'm sure there's, all right, bye.
Good night.